But I wanted to talk to Minneapolis just for a minute. There will be a trial, and the trial is Kim, I got the wrong gun Potter. You remember the cop that thought she was tasing someone and instead shot them dead? Well, jury selection begins tomorrow, and there will be a trial. And manslaughter is the charge. And the question is whether or not they'll be able to make this one stick. A little bit of reporting from ABC News. And if you'd like to join in, 844-967-2789. When a suburban Minneapolis police officer shot and killed Dewante Wright in April, her reaction on body camera video seemed to instantly establish the key facts of the case. I grabbed the wrong effing gun. Well, we don't know what expletive it is. It's not filled in here. Kim Potter said, I'm going to go to prison. But legal experts say a conviction for Potter, who says she meant to pull her taser, isn't as certain as it might seem. At least on the most serious charge, she faces first-degree manslaughter. As mentioned, jury selection begins tomorrow. The shooting of Wright, a 20-year-old black man, by the white officer sparked intense protest in Brooklyn Center, just as nearby Minneapolis was already on edge, as that city fired police officer Derek Chauvin, and he was on trial in the George Floyd death. The concrete barriers, chain link fencing, and National Guard soldiers that surrounded the courthouse for that trial are gone, but enhanced security will be in place for Potter's trial with fewer entry points and the closure of a parking garage. Potter, who resigned 2 days after the shooting, said she made an innocent mistake when she reached for her pistol instead of her taser. But prosecutors, including the leader of the team that got Chauvin convicted for murder, say Wright's death was manslaughter and that Potter, an experienced officer who was trained to know better, should go to prison. The big questions for the jury will be whether Potter's action rose to recklessness or culpable negligence, as the law requires. Defense attorneys who argue that Wright was responsible for his own death because he tried to drive off from a traffic stop could have dragged an officer to his death if Potter hadn't intervened. What we basically have is an innocent mistake, defense attorney Earl Gray said in a preview of his arguments, that she wasn't culpably negligent and that she didn't cause the death of Mr. Wright. He caused his death himself, by driving off. Got pulled over for a traffic stop. My understanding, there was a warrant out, but basically they knew where he lived. They could have executed the warrant at a later time. There was little or no reason to kill a man for an outstanding warrant.
Yeah, what is the outstanding warrant worthy of a death penalty? Is anything that he was accused of worthy of a death penalty?
Well, of course, the intent, if you believe the officer, the alleged Officer Potter, the intent was simply to tase, right? She even called out taser, taser, taser. And then, blank, she had the wrong weapon. Let me read a little bit more from the ABC News reporting thereof. Wright obeyed Lukey's orders to get out, but Lukey, another officer that responded to this scene, let me read all of it. According to the complaint, the officer Potter was training, Anthony Lukey, told Wright they stopped him in the afternoon of April 11th for an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror and the car's expired license plate tabs. Lukey then found an arrest warrant for a weapons violation. They went back to arrest him, joined by Sergeant Mickle Johnson. Wright obeyed Lukey's order to get out. So the now dead guy, Wright, got out of the car, but as Lukey was handcuffing him, Wright pulled away and got back in. As Lukey held onto Wright, Potter said, I'll tase ya. The video then shows Potter holding her handgun in her right hand and pointing it at Wright. Again, Potter said, I'll tase you. Then 2 seconds later, taser, taser, taser. 1 second later, she fired a single bullet into Wright's chest. And then she swore, I just shot him. I grabbed the wrong blanking gun, Potter said. A minute later, she said, I'm going to go to prison. Well, that's yet to be seen. That trial starts this week. Jury selection has begun, or will begin tomorrow, more accurately, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Prosecutors allege that Potter committed first-degree manslaughter by causing Wright's death while committing a misdemeanor crime, namely recklessly handling a gun, where death was reasonably foreseeable. The second-degree manslaughter count alleges that she acted with culpable negligence. Neither charge requires the intent to kill. Well, I don't think she had the intent to kill, but she did. Prosecutors suggested in pretrial filings that Potter should not have even used her taser. Police probably could have found Wright later, so the officers should have let him drive away, they suggested. Experts agree that drawing a firearm instead of a stun gun is rare. To avoid confusion, officers typically carry their stun guns on their weak side. So I'm right-handed. I would carry the stun gun on my left side, for example, by their non-dominant hand and away from the handguns carried on their strong side. That's how Brooklyn Center officers are trained and how Potter had her duty belt arranged. And there are several obvious differences between the two weapons. For one thing, a taser is yellow. A Glock, that was the handgun, is all black. Joe Friedberg, a local defense attorney who isn't connected to the case, said that Wright's attempt to drive off when Officer Johnson was partially inside the car would have been sufficient grounds for Potter to shoot and kill him intentionally. And that is enough to acquit, he said. Mike Brandt, another local defense attorney not connected with the case, saw it differently. He said it's clear Potter mishandled a firearm, an element of the first-degree manslaughter charge, though the jury might struggle with whether she did so recklessly. The culpable negligence or taking an unreasonable risk is easier to prove, making second-degree manslaughter more likely, Brandt said. Well, there was one other case. Here it is. In one of the best-known cases of grabbing a gun instead of a taser, a transit officer in Oakland, California, killed 22-year-old Oscar Grant in 2009. Johannes Merholzer, Mehserle, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. That was a prior case. Oakland awarded the family, through settlement, about $2.8 million. That, again, a similar taser mix-up. Love to hear from you, Minneapolis, if you're listening. AM 950, our friends up there on the, Minnesota's Progressive Voice. 844-967-2789. I know that there was some justice served with the Derek Chauvin trial. We, in our backyards here in the Wisconsin area, have recently seen the acquittal on all charges of Kyle Rittenhouse. He was the 17-year-old vigilante, and I'm not saying there's any parallel between these two cases, but we saw the murderers in the Ahmaud Arbery case. We saw them convicted. We saw that happen in a southern state, and maybe the obvious. I mean, it was so obvious, the circumstances of the murder. Well, maybe that called for a clear-cut verdict. But we have I will speak for me, for Crudy. I got a bad taste in my mouth currently after the Rittenhouse trial. And I wonder, in all these cases of self-defense and justifiable tasings or shootings, and so what if you're an experienced officer and you screwed up, well, you would have been justified to shoot the man. According to some attorneys, some would plead, self-defense or justifiable. Well, they certainly will, because there will be a trial in Minneapolis. Fancy, you look like you got something to say.
Okay. So let's take what she says at face value and assume that she is correct, and that she didn't know the difference, or that she couldn't tell it was just a mistake. And that's the thing. Okay. One, what's your training like? How did she make that mistake? Two, why is she training somebody else? How did she get in a position to train somebody else? I need to know the internals on this. I need to know exactly what is being taken, what steps are being taken to make sure this never happens ever again. So if this is an honest mistake, if this is something that somebody, my bad, I just pulled the wrong thing, I didn't know, he. Well, if that's the excuse, if that's what you're saying, then something needs to happen that's different.